They told us inflation was necessary, that 2% was healthy. But no one ever explained why your salary stayed flat while your rent doubled, your food bill soared, and your savings lost value by the hour. I'm Nate Ledger. I track the hidden incentives buried in our money system, because once you understand how deflation threatens the whole machine, you'll see why they'd rather let everything burn than let prices fall. This isn't conspiracy, it's policy. And if you're still pricing the future in dollars, you're playing a rigged game. Let me show you what they don't want priced into the truth. The system that can't survive cheap. I remember the first time I noticed it. My grocery bill was rising steeply, but the self-checkout line had doubled in size. Fewer employees, more automation, lower overhead. So why did my eggs cost 49% more than last year? That question haunted me. Because it wasn't just groceries. Healthcare has more software, better diagnostics, and robotic surgeries. Yet in the US, costs rose from $1.4 trillion in 2000 to over $4.5 trillion by 2023, a 221% increase. Meanwhile, your life expectancy flatlined. In some areas, it dropped. This doesn't make sense until you realize the system can't allow things to get cheaper. We live in a debt-based economy. And in a debt-based economy, prices must go up, or the whole house of cards falls apart. That's not an opinion. That's the math. Let me explain. In 1971, the US abandoned the gold standard. With one stroke of Nixon's pen, the dollar was no longer backed by anything but trust and credit. From that moment on, inflation became a feature, not a bug. Governments could borrow endlessly, and they did. The US national debt in 1971, $398 billion. Today, over $34.7 trillion. That's 8,600% growth. But if prices fall, deflation kicks in. Those debts become impossible to pay back. The system collapses under its own promises. This is why central banks panic when inflation drops too low. It's why your productivity gains never lead to lower prices. The more efficient we get, the more inflation they print. Because if money gets stronger, the entire illusion breaks. And that's not the only contradiction buried in the system. Let's move to Chapter 2, where we unpack why deflation isn't just discouraged, it's outlawed by design. Deflation is illegal by design. In theory, deflation should feel like relief. Your money gains value, prices fall, goods become more affordable. Sounds like economic progress. But in practice, deflation is treated like an existential threat, not by the public, by the very architects of the economy. And once you see why, you'll understand the strange truth. Our system is wired to punish abundance. Let's go back. In the 1930s, the United States experienced the most severe deflation in its history. Prices fell 25% between 1929 and 1933. Wages collapsed. Debt became unbearable. When prices fall, but debts stay fixed, repayments become more painful over time. It wasn't just a recession, it was a feedback loop of failure. Banks couldn't collect, borrowers couldn't pay, businesses shut down. That's what turned a crash into the Great Depression. Policymakers learned a brutal lesson: never let deflation take root. So, in 1946, Congress passed the Employment Act, mandating the federal government to maintain maximum employment, production, and purchasing power. Translation: always favor growth, even artificial growth, over price stability. Now fast forward. In 2008, Lehman Brothers collapses. Credit markets freeze. Deflation begins to creep in. What does the Fed do? It slashes interest rates to zero and launches quantitative easing, a polite term for printing money. The first QE round pumped $600 billion into the system. Within 5 years, that number ballooned to $4.5 trillion. Why? Because if prices fall, even slightly, the mountain of debt becomes unpayable. Every mortgage, every corporate bond, every pension fund projection is built on the assumption that tomorrow's dollars are less valuable than today's. Deflation reverses that. It's why central banks fear it more than war. It's why the European Central Bank fined banks for holding cash, negative interest rates, just to keep money circulating. And it's why governments will spend themselves into oblivion before they allow prices to reflect reality. This isn't economics, it's preservation. They've built an engine that can only run uphill. The moment the slope turns down, the machine seizes and the fuels panic. But here's the paradox. What if the world we're moving into is naturally deflationary? In Chapter 3, we explore why exponential technology is incompatible with inflation-based economics, and why that's tearing the system apart from the inside out. Exponential tech meets a fragile economy. I remember when a terabyte of storage cost $10,000, today it costs less than $20. That's a 99.8% drop in under 2 decades. But you didn't see your rent fall 99%, or your grocery bill, or your taxes. Because while technology moves exponentially, our economy runs on linear money, and that gap is widening into a fault line. Let me show you. In 1965, Gordon Moore observed that the number of transistors on a microchip doubled roughly every 18 to 24 months. That became Moore's law, and it's defined modern progress. Better, faster, cheaper. Semiconductors followed it. So did data storage, broadband, computing power, even solar panels. In fact, the cost of solar electricity dropped 89% between 2010 and 2023. AI compute, even faster. According to OpenAI, the amount of compute used in training frontier models has been doubling every 3.4 months since 2012. These aren't tweaks, they're paradigm shifts. But here's the catch. If technology makes everything cheaper, and the system requires prices to rise, the math breaks. Badly. Booth warned us in The Price of Tomorrow. We are in a system that must grow, because it is built on debt. But deflation is the natural order in a world driven by exponential technology. He's right. In 1990, a bank needed 30 employees per $1 billion of assets. By 2024, fintech startups like Stripe do it with fewer than 5. ChatGPT displaced millions of knowledge workers within 18 months of launch. Amazon's warehouse bots already outnumber their hourly workers, yet prices remain high. Why? Because deflation threatens the scaffolding of every pension fund, mortgage schedule, and government bond. If prices fall and productivity rises, debt burdens grow in real terms, and the system can't handle that. So instead of embracing cheaper, we inject artificial inflation to preserve an illusion of growth. Imagine a world where AI makes labor nearly free, where materials are abundant, and services are instantly accessible. But you still can't afford healthcare, or a home, or even eggs. That's not an economic glitch. It's a monetary rejection of reality. In Chapter 4, we look at where this rejection is most tragic. Healthcare, a system that gets richer the sicker you are, and punishes the very innovations that could cure you. The economy that profits when you stay sick. When I first saw the numbers, I had to check twice. In 1960, US healthcare spending was $146 per person per year. By 2023, that number had exploded to $13,493 per capita, an 8,140% increase. That's over $4.5 trillion a year, roughly 17.3% of US GDP, the highest in the world by far. And yet, the US ranks 37th in global healthcare outcomes, according to the World Health Organization. Worse outcomes, higher costs. How is that even possible? Because the system isn't built to heal, it's built to bill. Here's the paradox. Healthcare should be a poster child for deflation. Innovations abound. AI, diagnostics, robotic surgery, real-time wearable monitoring, gene sequencing. The cost of sequencing the human genome has fallen from $2.7 billion in 2003 to under $200 today. That's a 99.9999% decrease, yet you didn't see your insurance premiums drop, did you? That's by design. Every breakthrough that should make healthcare more affordable is absorbed by the pricing system, which must inflate to sustain itself. Hospitals negotiate opaque billing codes. Insurers mark up routine procedures. Pharma firms charge 500% plus above production cost for basic drugs. In 2022, the average cost of a one-night hospital stay in the US was $11,700. In Japan, $550. For the same antibiotics, the same x-rays, the same basic care, the US isn't broken, it's engineered for profit. And here's where it ties back to money. When governments rely on GDP growth to service debt, they need high-spending sectors. Healthcare, education, and housing are perfect, inelastic demand, moral urgency, and zero price transparency. Deflation in healthcare would collapse the illusion of economic growth. So instead of pricing cures, we price procedures. We delay automation. We inflate costs. Because if healthcare ever became efficient, the economy would shrink. I wish that were hyperbole. In Chapter 5, we explore the next frontier. What happens when AI and robotics force deflation, whether the system wants it or not? Because this time, there may be no policy powerful enough to stop it. When machines make prices fall, and no one can stop it. I remember watching a 2023 demo where AI agents scheduled shipments, negotiated prices, coordinated inventory, all without human intervention. The CEO smiled and called it operational freedom. I saw something else, the end of pricing as we know it, because here's the uncomfortable truth. AI is deflation in motion. And this time, it's moving faster than policy. Let's break it down. The average factory worker in the US earns about $42,000 a year, but Boston Dynamics Spot robot, after purchase, it runs 24/7, no wages, no HR, no sick days. The math doesn't lie. Labor is becoming cheaper to automate than to employ. Globally, the industrial robot market hit $52 billion in 2022, up from just $11 billion in 2015. By 2030, it's projected to surpass $165 billion. In logistics, Amazon uses over 750,000 robots in its warehouses, up from 1,000 just a decade ago. Human packers used to process 100 to 150 packages an hour. Today's AI plus robot hybrid systems do over 1,000. In finance, neural networks are already analyzing markets faster than any trader. By 2025, 90% of stock trading volume will be algorithmic. Price discovery. It's no longer a negotiation. It's code versus code. Here's the twist. As machines lower costs across every sector, the logical consequence should be falling prices for consumers, but the system isn't ready for that. It can't afford it, literally. Debt obligations, from government bonds to corporate loans, assume a world where prices, revenues, and wages go up. If AI slashes costs, and those savings translate into lower prices, the cash flow model dies. That's why inflation is manufactured through stimulus, subsidies, artificial bottlenecks. The system is actively resisting its own efficiency gains to preserve the illusion of growth. Imagine a society where abundance exists, but it's throttled to protect debt. That's not science fiction, that's monetary policy in the 2020s. In Chapter 6, we dive into Jeff Booth's ultimate warning. What happens when unstoppable deflation meets an unpayable debt system? And why Bitcoin may be the release valve no one's ready to accept. Jeff Booth's warning. The system can't pay what it owes. I remember the first time I heard Jeff Booth speak in 2020. Calm voice, no hype. Just a chilling statement. We're in a war between deflationary technology and an inflationary monetary system. That sentence hasn't aged. It's sharpened. Because while the public is still debating interest rates, Booth's warning has already played out in slow motion. Technology is making everything cheaper. The system just won't let it. Let's zoom out. Since 1971, when the US abandoned the gold standard, global debt has grown exponentially. In 1971, global debt was around $3 trillion. As of 2024, it's $315 trillion. That's 336% of global GDP. And here's the kicker. This debt must be repaid with future dollars worth less than today's. That's what inflation does. It erodes the debt. But if deflation takes hold, that same debt gets heavier, unpayable, system breaking. Booth calls this a trap of our own making. Take Japan, the original test case. Since the 1990s, it's faced near zero growth, aging demographics, and deflationary pressure. To cope, the Bank of Japan has printed endlessly. Its balance sheet now exceeds $5.5 trillion, more than 130% of GDP. The result? Stagnation, zombie corporations, government bond markets so fragile the central bank buys 70% of all issuance. Now multiply that across the Western world. The US alone pays over $1 trillion annually in interest on its national debt. That's more than the defense budget, more than Medicare. In 10 years, it's projected to exceed $2.5 trillion a year. But what happens when AI slashes tax bases by automating white-collar jobs? When robot-run companies don't pay payroll taxes? When technology outpaces human purchasing power? You get what Booth calls the compression of capitalism. Prices fall, jobs vanish, and governments go deeper into debt just to maintain the illusion of normal. He argues that Bitcoin, a monetary system built on scarcity, transparency, and no debt, offers an exit ramp, not just as a store of value, but as a foundation for pricing in a deflationary world. Sound extreme? Consider this. In 2023, BlackRock, Fidelity, and Franklin Templeton, the largest asset managers on Earth, began buying and offering Bitcoin. Not for speculation, for insurance, because even they see it. The system can't be saved by printing. It can only be outgrown. In Chapter 7, we explore what that outgrowth looks like, a new architecture of value, where machines transact with machines. And money starts to behave like energy. When money becomes energy and machines start spending it, I once thought of money as something only humans used, earned, saved, spent. But now, I watch machines do it quietly, relentlessly, and most people have no idea. We're entering a phase where AI agents transact with each other, pricing resources, negotiating contracts, allocating compute, without human involvement. And in this world, the dollar is too slow, too fragile, and far too political. Let's start with infrastructure. In 2021, Gitcoin launched its first on-chain quadratic funding experiment. The idea: let thousands of people decide where grants should go, weighted not by who donates most, but by the diversity of support. $1 from 1,000 people outweighs $1,000 from one. That's not philanthropy. That's decentralized capital allocation run entirely by smart contracts. No boardrooms, no gatekeepers, just code scoring intent and executing it. Fast forward. By 2024, Optimism and Arbitrum, two Ethereum-based Layer 2s, had processed hundreds of millions in autonomous distributions, allocating funds to protocols, builders, even charities based on on-chain voting and transparent logic. Meanwhile, in the physical world, autonomous robots began bidding for power. In Germany, electric vehicles on the Mobility Open Blockchain Initiative, MOBIRE, started transacting directly with charging stations. Tesla announced plans for autonomous ride-hailing, where self-driving cars negotiate rates, charge themselves, and even pay tolls, all with no human intervention. Now think bigger. When machines generate revenue, who owns it? When an AI model designs a product, sources the parts, and sells it online, what currency does it prefer? The answer won't be the US dollar. It's too slow, too centralized, and too inflation-prone. Instead, it will be programmable money like Bitcoin, Ethereum, or even new AI-native tokens built for trustless instant settlement. Jeff Booth hinted at this. The future economy won't be managed. It will be automated. We're building toward a world where value behaves like energy, flowing, routing, and optimizing on its own. But unlike electricity, this value doesn't just light a room. It rewrites the incentives behind entire industries. In Chapter 8, we confront the final question. If money becomes programmable, decentralized, and deflationary, who writes the rules? Because once the middlemen are gone, what's left is code, and whoever controls it. Chapter 8, when code becomes law and money has no master. There's a saying in cryptography circles, he who controls the key controls the kingdom. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, because if we're moving into a world where money is code and contracts are smart, then the real question isn't what backs our currency, it's who programs its behavior. Let me show you what that means. Back in 2015, Estonia rolled out e-residency, allowing global citizens to launch fully legal companies, open bank accounts, and pay taxes entirely online. By 2024, over 100,000 digital citizens were transacting across borders without ever setting foot in the EU. This wasn't policy innovation, it was code-based sovereignty. But the next evolution came from DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. On paper, they're leaderless entities governed by tokens and smart contracts. In practice, they're programmable corporations. Uniswap, the leading decentralized exchange, executed over $1.7 trillion in trades between 2020 and 2024, without a single employee setting prices. Treasury allocations, development grants, and fee structures were voted on by code-connected wallets. No CEOs, no CFOs, just rules, written in Solidity, enforced by consensus. And this is only the beginning. As of 2025, over $80 billion in assets sit in DAO-controlled treasuries, managed not by executives but by collective governance protocols. Projects like MakerDAO, Aave, and Curve now serve millions globally, issuing loans and managing interest rates without ever touching a bank. But here's the paradox. Once money becomes programmable, who gets to write the program? We've already seen exploits like the infamous The DAO hack in 2016, where $60 million in ETH was siphoned off due to a smart contract loophole. It forced Ethereum's first hard fork. One line of faulty logic split an entire blockchain community and raised a terrifying truth. The law is only as good as the code behind it. And governments, they're scrambling to catch up. The US, EU, and China are now racing to launch CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, coded money with embedded rules. When you can spend, where you can spend, even if you can spend at all. In China's pilot, digital yuan wallets could expire if unused, forcing consumption. Money as a leash. Programmable compliance. The promise of deflationary freedom now runs parallel to a new surveillance architecture, autonomous finance on one hand, authoritarian liquidity on the other. So we're left with this. If inflation was the lie we all lived with, then programmable deflation is the power we've never held. And as the systems crash and the old guards fade, only one question remains. Will the next monetary system be written for us or without us? Outro. If you followed this far, you're not most people. You see the pattern, you feel the stakes, and you know the game is changing faster than they can rewrite the rules. Welcome to the new financial frontier. I'm Nate Ledger, and this is just the beginning